Hi, this is Linda with Watery Wishes, and I'm finally back with another card. Now, everything that possibly could go wrong when I was making this card did, and if you look to the right of screen, you will see some ink blended cardstock that I had already done these flowers, and the heat embossing didn't really work that well. So I'm redoing it, and because I was using clear over a grey distress oxide, it's really hard to see when that clear has actually sort of been worked properly with the heat gun. You don't get that instant change of colour like you do with white or gold or any of the others, or even clear over black, because it's over such a sort of muted grey. You don't see any colour change at all. It's really a hard thing to see, and I had this idea in my head, and I wasn't going to let the embossing powder win. It was just not going to happen. I was going to get this done the way I wanted it done, no matter what. And there is a lot of footage I cut out of this because this card was so frustrating, but I'm happy with the way it turned out in the end. And that's the way it goes sometimes when you're making cards or have an art project. See, and that's me trying to look and feel to see if the heat embossing worked this time. Also, this second time around, I'm going in with a bit of a lighter hand using that Seedless Preserves. And I had this idea for this grey, sort of tealy green, sort of purpley red coloured card. So I sort of picked out the colours first and then looked for the stamps that I was going to use. And this set by Simon Says Stamp, this Spring Flowers set, is just, it's great. It's a pain to arrange on a card because when you're using all of the stamps, it's sort of, there's a lot. So that can be a bit of a pain, and that took me forever as well. But yeah, I really loved the way this turned out. As you can see here, I'm inking up a piece of cardstock. It's a piece of Nina 80-pound cardstock, and I originally intended just to do the edges of this cardstock, but then decided to go all the way in. I also, to cut out this piece of cardstock, it's a penny black antique frame die set. I think that's what it is anyway. And now I'm just going to spray it and sprinkle it with a bit of water. Oh no, it's not just water, that's got a bit of the, it's water mixed with the Nouveau Platinum mousse, and it gives a real shimmery effect. I forgot about that. There, you can see it when the light hits it. And because I've got so many little fiddly bits that I have to arrange on this card panel, I'm actually using my Tombow glue as a temporary adhesive. This is a trick I learnt from watching Kelly Latavola. If you haven't checked her out, as I've said before, you definitely should. She's not everyone's cup of tea, but I absolutely love listening to her tell stories while she's colouring cards with Copics. So I tried various arrangements on this card, and it took me a while. But the good thing about using the Tombow as a temporary adhesive, or even any temporary adhesive, is you can move things around, put them in place, and when you're placing other things, all your work in placement doesn't just get ruined as you're putting the rest of the images down. I just love these two colours together. It's definitely a combination that I never thought I'd use or even think of, but definitely stands out on that grey. Now here I've stamped a sentiment from the Concord and Ninth Happy Words, and it says "You make me," and I end up not using this exact sentiment that I've stamped and heat embossed in Ranger Superfine Detail White, and that's because when I get it onto the card it just looks a little bit too big. So I'll stamp it again with some smaller sentiments that I've pieced together through stamp surgery later on. Now here I am stamping down the happy out of the same sentiment set, and I'm going to heat emboss this with clear. Now I had something really good happen that was completely unintentional when I stamped and heat embossed this. Because I had so much trouble with the flowers and heat embossing clear over the grey, I felt that I would give it a second coat with some sticky embossing ink and then heat emboss it again with the same clear. But what happened, even though I'd put it in the exact same spot in my Misty and then stamped it with the Versamark, is it ended up overlapping over the grey, and you'll see when I ink blend over the top of it, it's got this white drop shadow, which actually turned out really, really cool and was completely unintended. So I'm gonna have to mess around with that a little bit more and see if I can get that to work on an actually intentional basis. But as you can see, there's a little bit of white just around the grey. And I was really, really happy with how that turned out. As Bob Ross says, happy little accidents. This was one of them. Now, you'll see me fiddling around with this "You make me" sentiment, and I did change it. It probably would have looked okay, but to me it just felt a tiny bit chunky. So this is after I've stamped the smaller text. You can see it just underneath my hands there, and I've put tiny little pieces of foam underneath all those letters in the word happy, and a little bit of foam underneath that sentiment. So now that I have the sentiment down, I'm going to pull out some of my pre-made Nouveau drops just to get the spacing right. I will actually use the bottle of Nouveau drops direct onto the card, I have these on hand for two reasons. They're really good as placeholders, so you can see what it's going to look like when you actually have them on the card. And if you need a card right now and you've made it and you don't have time for those drops to dry overnight, it's really handy to have some pre-made, just so that you can stick them on the card with some glue and just, you know, they're set and ready to go in minutes. So I'm just popping some air bubbles on top there. These drops have sort of thickened up a little bit, but I think that's meant to be expected over time. So once I've tapped these down, I'll put the card aside so the drops can dry for 24 hours or overnight. Now, here are the photos. If you like the video, hit that like button. If you didn't, hit the dislike button. I'd love it if you subscribed. I'll see you guys in the next one. And don't forget, have fun crafting your imagination. Bye.